Okay, here we are. Could I have your name, please?
Helen Wysocki.
Do you have a middle name?
Helen Henrietta.
Henrietta Wysocki.
Yes.
When was your birthday?
November 1st, 1909.
And where were you born?
I was born in Ashlet, New Hampshire.
Have you ever been back up to Ashlet, New Hampshire?
Well, I've been there once when I had to get my birth certificate, because when I worked at the Miller's Falls Stool Company, I went, during the World War II, and they had to have our birth certificates. So, and there was no train going through there at that time except cargo train, one car or two, where they had all the groceries and things to deliver to the station up in Ashlet, New Hampshire. So we got there.
You took the train from Greenfield to Ashlet?
Yes. Then we got there. We found out that the little town hall was burnt to the ground, so we had to go to Winchester, and we didn't have any way to go up there, so we went to the man that talked to us, and he got us a taxi, and we went to Winchester, New Hampshire, and that's where we got our birth certificate.
Now, what was your father's name?
Peter Jerominek.
Did he have a middle name that you know of?
Not as I know of.
Where was he born?
He was born in Europe.
Do you know
Well, I don't know exactly the name now. I can't remember, but it was near the German border, as I know, because he said that he worked, when he was old enough, he worked as a teamster or a chauffeur at that time for a German well-to-do person.
Really? He was born in Poland, though.
Yeah, he was born in Poland, but he traveled back and forth. And he had, at that time, he had 4 great white horses, and he drove, and it was more or less, he was like a bus driver, you know, because he used to pick up all the people along the way, or the country way, and take them to church or wherever they were going.
But he was driving a horse and wagon, correct?
Yeah, oh yes, horse and wagon.
What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was, her maiden name was Teofila Kulish.
Do you know when she was born at all?
Well, I got it over here. My father was born March 13th, 1886. My mother was born September 17, 1892.
1892. And she was born also in Poland?
Yes.
When did they pass away?
They passed away, Dad passed away in I don't know.
It was around 1960 somewhere, early 60s?
Yeah, Steffi died. I got Agus, children, Helen. Gee, and I haven't, let's see. Peter Jerominek. Can I get up and get
You'll come back to you sooner or later.
He passed away in August 14th, I remember, but I don't know whether it's 63 or 64.
Okay, all right. Now, do you know of any other relatives living out in Poland or Europe at all?
Well, at that time, when we had World War II, we were sending packages to Poland. You know, because they were poor, we were sending packages. Well, one time, about a year later or something, we got a telegram from them that they were caught. Well, how should I say it? They weren't caught, but the
packages were intercepted?
Yes.
Okay.
and they they took the material and the coats and things out of their packages, and they when we had to send the packages, they went by a boat or a ship. And lots of times in the winter time or in the fall, or there was big storms, they would get wet. So we put them in burlap bags so they wouldn't get wet. Well, that particular time, we sent 3 packages, and they all come back. They were opened, and the stuff was taken out of them, and the burlap bag was everything, and they send them back.
When you sent the packages over, what did you do to prevent them from getting wet and soggy from the inside of the boat?
Well, we put shellac over them. We put shellac over them, then we put the burlap bag over them, and the shellac stuck to the bags.
Now, when they came back, did you have any further correspondence with your relatives in Poland?
No. After a while, well, I don't know, but it must have been about a year, and they said that my grandmother was dead and they were killed, and that it was an awful story. Of course, I knew a little Polish at that time, and so I used to write Polish letters for the parents, and even for the neighbors like Bannocks and everything that lived on Chapman Street. And they wrote and said that a trailer or a truck dug a hole, not a truck, but a ditch digger or whatever you call it.
Bulldozer?
And they dug a hole and they just pushed all the bodies in the hole and covered them up. And then that was the last that we ever heard from them.
This was from the war?
Yeah, that was when the Russians come in.
Oh.
The Russians come in. That's what the Russians did.
So they could have mass murdered everyone in the town that they were living in?
Yeah, they took the whole territory, the whole town.
When your mother and father immigrated into the United States, why did they come to the United States?
Because at that time the Germans were looking for, they were invading the homes, and Dad was a little boy, so they turned around and hid him in a cellar. And at that time there was, cellars that didn't have cement or anything, so they had that. And when they did that, they covered him up with sand. So when the Germans invaded, they couldn't find anybody. And that's when they turned around, decided that it was time to take the young generation home. So my mother and my father, they all come on the same boat in a group. And
do you know how old they were when they immigrated?
well, they were young. They couldn't have been very old, because they wouldn't let the little kids go without their parents. And when, like my mother was saying, she says, we were still young, but they pushed us out and made us go because they said that it would be hard in this country, and they heard America was a good place to go to.
When they arrived in the United States, where did they come into? New York City, Boston, or where?
They come to what's that island called?
Ellis Island?
Yes. And in the meantime, there was a man well, I suppose he was a man. What's the word I want to use?
Spokesperson?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that he wanted to hire, because we were supposed to get interpreter,
Mm-hmm.
and for that. At that time, he was there to look for help for the New England Box Company in Winchester, New Hampshire.
He was like an agent coming
Yeah,
back.
agent.
Okay.
And of course there was and the ship that we come onto that my folks come, they were under the contract. Those two men got together. And so when Dad and Mom come right away, they took them to the thing, had them checked, examined, and everything else, and took them right up there to that. It was a tent, and they got a job right away.
Did they leave any brothers and sisters behind in Poland that you know of?
Well, they had one brother on my dad's side, but he come later.
Okay.
Or I guess maybe Dad took him or brought him or sent money for him. But my mom had 3 sisters, but they didn't come. One started to come with her husband, but when she got here, her eyes were bad, and they sent her back. And my uncle, his name was Paul. So Uncle Paul, he stayed here for a year. He worked till he got enough money and traveled back to Europe to his family, because he left, one of my sisters and some children, I can imagine, yes.
Okay. Now, your mother and father came to Ellis Island. They were greeted by the, let's say, the agent for the box company up in New Hampshire.
Yes.
How long did your parents live up in New Hampshire?
Well, they lived, I guess, for about 4 or 5 years, because I was born there, and my sister Evelyn was born there, and Jane was born there. 3 of us were born there. And then we had to move. My dad got sick. You see, he was making boards out of logs. And at that time, they didn't have no masks, they didn't have nothing. And all that dust and everything he inhaled, and then he got sick. And of course, at that time, they didn't know what was the matter with him or anything. But later on, before he passed away, the doctor, when he took x-rays of him and everything, he said that his lungs were so filled with that fine sawdust pulp.
So, when he decided to leave the box company, where did you move to?
We moved to Greenfield.
Do you know the address in Greenfield?
Yeah, we lived up on Wells Street. We lived in a 2-family house. It was like a, long. It wasn't upstairs or downstairs. It was just 1 family, but 2-family house. It was 158. I think it was 158 Wells Street.
Does that house still exist?
I don't know. I haven't been. I've been on Chapman Street and all over, but I haven't. No, I don't know. Okay. I can't say.
What was your earliest recollection of living in Greenfield?
Well, the earliest, we travel by train from New Hampshire to Greenfield, to the railroad station. We got out, and of course, somebody met us because we already had a place to live. Then, the first thing we saw was horses and carts, and there was a lot of people, and everybody was clapping, and music. There was music, so I don't know whether the music was for us or for who. I don't know.
What year do you think that was that you moved to Greenfield?
Oh, let's see. It had to be about 1913. Yeah.
Now, what jobs did your father have when you were living in Greenfield?
Well, he worked for the Greenfield Tap and Dye on Deerfield Street, not on Sanderson Street, on Deerfield Street.
And what was his job there?
He was, he was like a machinist. He was running because he brought little wheels or something glued in when he come home. I guess it must have been a bad one or something, so he brought it home. Yeah.
Now, let's see, you had 3 sisters, no, you
Yeah.
had 3 children up in Ashlet, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
How many of your sisters were born in Greenfield?
Sisters were born in Greenfield.
Mhm.
Let's see. Oh, here's my Uncle Frank. He's my father's brother. He's passed away already. Let's see, there was, Jane, I, and Evelyn. There was, Steph was born in Greenfield. Stella was born in Greenfield. And Nellie. 3 born in Greenfield
So
at that time.
Okay, so you had 3 in New Hampshire.
And 3 in Greenfield.
How did everyone live in that house? How many bedrooms did you have?
We had 2 bedrooms.
Only 2 bedrooms. Okay.
No, I'll take it back. We had 3 bedrooms. 2 bedrooms upstairs, 1 bedroom downstairs. Dad and Mom slept downstairs, and 3 girls in 1 bed and 3 girls in another bed. That's how we slept. And we had an outhouse. We didn't have no bathroom at that time.
What was your remembrance of going to the outhouse?
Well, we went in the back somewhere. There was a woodshed,
Mhm.
and then we opened the door and we took a step down and we went to the outhouse.
Whose job was it to clean out the outhouse?
There was a man that come around and cleaned it up,
Really?
but he come only once in the summertime or in the spring. Other than that, and we used to put Mother used to Lysol,
Mhm.
and she used to mix it up with hot water or something, and we'd go pour it. And of course the door was closed and everything. There was 2 holes.
Did you have running water in the house, though?
Yeah, we had running water in the house, but no hot water, no nothing, just cold water.
What were some of the meals that your mother used to cook for you?
Well, mostly she bought pig's feet, pig's feet, salt pork or rat pork, and she used to fry it and make like white gravy with it, and we used to pour it over the potatoes, and we had sauerkraut and potatoes and stuff. And in the fall, during Easter season or Lenten season, well, she'd buy sardines and put. And in the summer, they'd go out because there would be a lot of woods. Now there is no woods around in Greenfield, but before there used to be a lot of woods. So they would pick mushrooms, and we strung them up on the string, and she hung them up in the behind the stove and over the stove and dried, and we had mushrooms.
Would you consider yourself rich up in Greenfield? Did your father make a decent living, or did you?
No,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Now, some of the kids that you played with on your street, do you remember any of them?
I remember them, but I wouldn't know them now because, of course, they're grown and married and everything, and I don't know them.
There was a rumor that you used to beat up the priest, Father Schweider.
Yes, he was what his father and his mother come on the same boat with my mother and father, see, and of course they go to each other's house, and we would play Dad and Mom and the Bannocks. They were on the same boat, so there was 3 of us, and then there was a family by the name of Stahelek. There was 4 couples, and the 4 couples would come to our house because we had a great big dining room and a table, and they'd all come around to the table and play cards. And later on, we'd give them, Mother would make some cake or something or we never had any sandwiches, but I remember we always had some kind of a cake and to eat. And of course the men at that time on Wells Street, I remember going down the hill. I think I was about, let's see, how old was Nikki then? How old is Nikki? 11 years old or 12?
She's 12.
I think I was as old as Nikki, and used to have that milk pail. Remember those milk pails that they had with a hand, swinging handle? Well, I would go down to the past. I remember past the Miller's Falls Stool Company, and I would walk up by the Victoria Theater now. I guess they're going to tear it down now. I walked down up to there, and they would fill up the bucket with beer, and I would bring it down to the house again, and the men would drink the beer. Whoever won the game would drink beer. The ones that didn't win the game didn't drink the beer.
Did everyone in the household speak Polish, or was it English?
All Polish. We always spoke Polish till I started going to school there. Then,
when you went to school, where did you go to school?
well, I went to school on School Street, on Davis Street, and School Street and Davis Street and Elm Street. 3 schools.
Now, with your sisters, when you left, what made you leave Greenfield?
Well, because my father got sick again working in the shop. So we had to, the doctor said in order to live there with his lungs the way they were, and the heat and moisture in the shop at the Greenfield Tap and Die, had to get out in the open. And the only thing to do was, the doctor said, for him to get out somewhere in the farming area. So that's how we happened to buy a farm and go on the farm.
Now, your father never really had any farming experiences, did he?
No, he didn't.
Yeah. And how old were you when you moved to Conway?
Well, let's see. I went to the Conway school. I went to the fourth, fifth, and sixth grades. The Conway school only had up to 6th grades, and that's all. They didn't have no 7th or 8th grade.
Well, let's stay in Greenfield for a few minutes before we move up to Conway. When your sisters were born, did your mother go to the hospital, or did they?
No, they were born right at home.
Right.
There was no such thing as hospitals or going to the hospital.
Did you take part in any of the births at all?
Well, I took part at the Conway.
Okay.
When the baby was born, Dad would open the door to the upstairs, and he'd call me and, "Come down here," he said, and there I'd take a tub, stand it in front of the stove, open the oven door, and fill up water and put a little blanket on the bottom, and I rolled another blanket to make it for the head, and I'd wash the baby and put it up and everything, and then take it to Mom.
When you were still up in Greenfield, what did you do for entertainment up there in Greenfield? Your family do for entertainment?
There was no entertainment whatsoever. We just played outside, outdoors.
Did you ever go to see a movie?
No, we
Why not?
couldn't afford a movie then.
Did you ever go out dancing at all, or?
Oh no,
Picnics?
no.
And what about church? Which church did you belong to?
We went to the Sacred Heart Church in Greenfield on Deerfield Street.
So tell me about your move up to Conway. moving up
Well,
to the
when
hills?
we moved up to Conway, it was altogether a different thing. We saw cows and horses. We were petrified. We were scared of them and everything. And we had to milk them. After a while, we got used to it because the horses and the cows didn't bother us. But we raised tobacco, and I had to lead the horse by the halter and everything and turn him around and everything. And after a while, I got so that Dad would get the uh, school bus, and the school bus was a two-seater buggy, and it had the fringe on top and gas lights, and we named our cows and horses by name. Everybody had a name there, and at night when it was dark, we'd get out of school and it was already getting dark, so I had to light up the
And you were the school bus driver, right?
yes. That was a school bus, that two-seater buggy. There
Yeah.
was no school buses then.
And you went to school, where was the school? Oh, well, first of all, what was the address up in Conway that you,
Well, it was, there was no address. It was
Roaring Brook Road?
Roaring Brook Road,
Okay.
yeah.
Did the farm have a name as to the people you bought it from?
Well,
or
we
whatever?
bought it from Sarker.
Do you remember how much your father paid for the place?
Gee, I don't know. I guess 2,400.
How many acres were there?
80. It all wooded lots, you know. It had 3 pastures it had, see, so it was and of course there was a lot of, well, we raised 4 acres of tobacco, and then we had a lot of corn. We had a lot of hayfield because we had 18 head of cattle, plus the yearlings, you know, and everything, and we had our own hay.
What did you and your sisters do to help out on the farm?
Well, we all worked.
Doing what?
We raised corn, we had to hoe it. We planted it, we hoed it, and potatoes, tobacco, we planted tobacco bed. We had tobacco beds that we planted seed so that we had our own tobacco plants.
Do you ever remember having any fun up there with your sisters?
Oh yes, we always raised the dickens among ourselves.
Who was the biggest troublemaker up there?
Well, I always got in trouble because I always dared everybody to come, and I wouldn't get hurt, but the guys would fall and get hurt or get a bleeding nose or something.
What type of punishment did you get?
Oh, my punishment was terrible. My father he was good to us in every way, but when we did wrong, and and I was the oldest, so if anything happened, I got punished because I should have known better. I shouldn't have let those kids go. When they fell in the brook or something, why did you let them fall in the brook? So out I go get punished.
How many sisters were born up in Conway?
Nellie, Franny, Marion, Sebby, and Christine.
Christine was born in Greenfield? I thought Christine was born in Greenfield.
No,
she was
Christine
born,
was,
okay.
yeah,
So altogether, that makes how many sisters in how many kids in the family?
10.
10. Okay. It was 10. When you were talking about your mother giving birth, or whatever, do you remember any screaming, yelling, or was it just everyone was
No.
serious and she just
No.
had
Dr. Street used to come down. Dad would call. That's when we got a telephone. We didn't have no electric lights then. And that's when we had a telephone. Dr. Street would call. I guess between Mom and Dad, I guess they understood when things were ready to.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were working up on the farm, you never learned how to swim.
No, I still don't know how to swim.
Why?
Because I was taught to stay away from the water.
Why?
because it's no good, we'll get drowned. And I had the kids with me all the time, my kid sisters, and if they could put their feet in the water and they could walk around the edges, but they could not go in the water.
What about riding a bicycle?
Oh no, no bicycles. Sleds, we had a double sled or runner, yeah, a double sled. And we'd go down the hill like the Dickens, and we'd bump into the trees, and we'd smash our heads and our knees and come home crippled. And
who are some of your neighbors up there?
well, Harvey Moore was one, Marion Markwell's father, but of course they've gone already, they passed away. Fred Antes, Cyphers, and Boyden's down the hill, our closest neighbor.
What was the school like?
Well, the school that I went to had only, there's 6 or 8 of us. There was a couple of aunties, 2 Boydens. I think the Boydens, there was 2 girls in Boydens. Aunties, there was 2 boys, George and some, I don't know, George and Louis or something. And the 4 of us, Jeromineks. Wagger was one, couple Waggers.
Was the teacher very strict?
No, she wasn't. No. Only, well, the boys stayed at one end, and we girls stayed in another end, and we had an outhouse. It was when the bell would ring for us to go play exercise, first the girls would go to the outhouse, then they'd come back to their room, and then, well, anyway, there was one room with a pot-belly stove.
Now, well, we discussed a little bit about the crops that you grew, whatever. What were the family, when you had family gatherings, the holidays?
Oh, well, the family gathering was Rutkowski on top of the hill, Wolves, Alice's, and we would exchange greeting cards. They'd come over and visit for a while, but then they had to go because in the wintertime, that's where we did most of our visiting, because you see, in the morning it would be dark, and at night it would be dark. And we had lanterns for the cows and everything, and the cows would have to be out in the barnyard. In the meantime, you would clean the stables, feed the cows, and they would get their water and then come back. And by that time, it was time to milk them. So there wasn't too much going on. Of course, we had a little tiny radio, one of those little ones and everything, that we all sat around and listened to it about the weather and the news or something.
What was it, we'll get to the weather in a few minutes, but describe the farm. How many buildings, where they were located, how big they were, the house. Let's first start with the farmhouse.
Our farmhouse?
Yeah,
we had 2 bedrooms upstairs. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what, it was one big bedroom. It wasn't finished off. One big bedroom. It had one window on one side, another window on the other side. Mm-hmm. And we had 2 bedrooms. One was in one end and another was in another end. And the heat, well, we had in the kitchen we had a round hole, and the heat would come up from the kitchen. That's the heat that we got.
So, where did your mother and father sleep? Downstairs?
Downstairs.
And what was the downstairs like?
Well, they had a bedroom, they had a living room, and they had it was one of those old-fashioned chimneys, you know, where there was fireplaces. And it was in the it was sort of centered like, so that from the kitchen you could have a fire, and from the living room you could have a fire going, and it would all go up the chimney.
With 10 kids sleeping upstairs, And there were, what, 10 kids all at once, or was there 9?
What?
How many sisters were sleeping upstairs at once?
Well, I know we had some cots there, but
Did you sleep on the floor, or were they feather beds or mattresses, or?
Oh, we had feather beds. We had our own feather beds because all the chickens that we killed, we saved the feathers. And in the wintertime, when we come home from school, we'd pluck the feathers, and everything. Oh, we were nice and comfy in those feather beds, I'm telling you. It was nice. But we had to get up 4 o'clock in the morning. So we went to bed early.
You said, did you have an organ or a piano or anything in the house for entertainment, or was it just a radio?
Well, we had the little radio, but then Dad and I used to go a lot to auctions. And we bought one of those Victrolas and records. And Dad would go to Greenfield once in a while, and we'd go to the Greenfield music store and buy Polish records. And we'd come and we'd we'd get together so that the Rutkowskis and George Wolfe, George Wolfe, Rutkowski, and Wager, and we'd push the table aside and we'd play the thing and we'd dance to that music.
How'd you used to get to Greenfield? Trolley?
We got to Greenfield after all the girls grown up and they went their way.
No, when you went shopping to Greenfield from the farm.
Horse and buggy.
Horse and buggy.
Yes, and at that time there was a second-hand horse stable that he bought and sold horses, and that's where we went. And on Main Street near the town, I think there was that great big fancy horse trough for the horses, and hitch up the horses. So we hitched them up right on Main Street. There wasn't very many cars there then.
Speaking of cars, when did all the farm work that was done by horse and plow and wagons and whatever, you never had a tractor?
No, a tractor. Are you kidding?
So you never had a car up in Conway either, that you can recall. So tell me a little bit about some of the sisters. What mischief or what little quirks did some of your sisters have that you can remember up in Conway?
Well, they went to school, and later on, after Evelyn and Jane graduated, they had a high school in South Deerfield. So they went to South Deerfield to high school. And from there, when they graduated, then they got, and mostly in the summertime, we used to have a lot of people driving from Springfield, come to the country. And they would always stop at our house, and of course we'd give them something to eat. We asked them, we were generous with our chickens. I guess that's mostly what we had. Well, we had 4 pigs and little ones.
These people that used to come up from Springfield, who were they?
Carlisles, and I don't know what
How did you know the Carlisles?
Well, they come because they were going to I don't remember. I know that they used to come down, and we used to have a picnic table, and they would bring a lot of food. In other words, it was like a picnic for them. They'd travel, and they had a big fancy car. I don't know the name of it, but it had to be a Ford because it looked like a Ford to me. And they traveled a lot, and it seems as if Carlisle's had a store. And when Jane graduated, when Jane graduated, she worked for them as a bookkeeper. And then Anne, when Anne graduated from high school and all that, then Jane got acquainted there and everything and got her a job and all that. And then when Anne got married, she worked at the Hartford shop, shops.
When were you living on the farm during the Great Depression?
Yes.
You were.
Yeah.
How did the Depression affect you?
Well, on the farm we had everything, so it didn't affect us too much because we had our own potatoes, we had our own corn, and we had a lot of beans and tomatoes, and we always did a lot of canning. So, and when we sold our milk to Weeks's. We had those 240 cans full, so that's 80 pounds, and we'd sell the milk to them. What was left, we had to keep ourselves. So Mom would gather the cream off the milk, and we make our own butter. We had our own chickens, so we had plenty of eggs. So when we went we went to Conway to the general store, and it was run by Floyd Clark, the one that had 9 boys. And they always said between Peter Jerominek and Floyd Clark, they always had jokes about it.
I would imagine.
So I would bring in a case of eggs, and they would give me sugar, oatmeal, and flour. That's the way we traded in. So you see, we didn't go hungry there, that's for sure.
What about your celebration of, did anyone celebrate birthdays in your family?
No, there was no such thing as that.
What about Christmas?
Oh, well, Christmas we celebrated. We had our own turkey, so we cooked the turkeys in the oven, and we'd go to church, and we'd come back, and the turkeys were in the oven. We filled the stove up so that we knew for how long it would be. We'd fill the stove, and then we would close all the dampers and everything so that we knew everything would be safe.
Where did you go to church?
When we lived in Greenfield, we went to church, the Sacred Heart Church in Deerfield Street. But when we went to South Deerfield here.
Oh.
Yes.
And you loaded up the wagon and you headed to church.
Yeah, we loaded up the wagon, and while we went to church, we took the bridle off and put on the feed bag for the horse, and we had a bag that we put in hay in it and everything, because there's a place for the buggy. And
you went to the St. Stanislaus Church.
St. Stanislaus Church.
Were
Father Lexton was there at that time.
Were there a lot of other people that brought their horse and buggies to church with them?
Well, there was quite a few, but not too many. But later on, there was a lot of cars, and the horses would jump and be scared of the cars.
How old were you when you left the farm up in Conway?
Well, I went to work for Floyd Clark because at the store, when after the 6th grade, because I couldn't get a permit to work, so I worked for them, and for a couple of years. And then one time, when Dad sold his tobacco, he sold it for Gilbert Morton here in Brad Street in Hatfield.
Okay.
And then they wanted someone, so I left them and went to work for Gilbert and Morton.
When you went to work for Gilbert and Morton, did you stay at their house? Or
Yes,
you
I
did?
stayed at their house. I did housework in the morning. In the afternoon, I stripped tobacco.
Now, how much were you paid for that?
Well, what I got paid, Mom and Dad, they sent a check to them.
So
I think I worked for $18 a month. Every month they send a check out to Mom and Dad, and I didn't get no money there.
Did you have to like sign a contract or something to work there? Or?
Well, no, I worked there.
Did you like the work?
Yes, I like the work in the afternoon with because a lot of people come in, you know, and I got to know a lot of girls.
Did you keep in touch with the family in Conway?
Oh yes,
Mm-hmm.
once a month I had it off.
Once you had 1 day off a month.
Yeah.
1 day off a month. How many of your sisters were still left up in Conway when you went back up there? Did a lot of them, right while you were down working in Hatfield, did they go off someplace else for education, or did they?
Well, Jane, Evelyn worked on Bradstreet. After she graduated, you know, from grammar school, she worked, and so she went to work, and she worked in Belden's because, you know, I worked on Bradstreet. Belden's were there and everything. I got the people, so that's how she got there. And then Agnes Osipovich lived a little further up, and then the Hafey twins I knew, you know, I got acquainted and everything, and so we got around. And we used to walk to Hatfield to church there and everything, and we'd walk back and we'd sing songs and everything. Other than that, there was...
Did you ever see any discrimination against the Polish people?
Well, lots of times they would, especially when we lived on Bradstreet, they'd say, oh, here comes the Polacks. That's about it. You know what I mean. That's the expression I heard. But we kept our noses down. We didn't say anything. We never started anything. We just minded our own business.
How old were you when you met your husband?
Oh, I was 19, I think. Yeah, that's how I met him, working in at Bradstreet on at Morton's, Gilbert Morton.
And what was his name?
He was a sorter. We were all strippers. Sizers. We sized the tobacco.
What was his name?
Joe
What was his last name?
Podworski.
Now, where did he live?
He lived here in Sunderland.
Where did he?
Yeah. At that time it was Garage Road, you know, and Miller had the garage. Of course, now it's not a garage. It's whether it's torn down, and it's.
So, what was your courtship like?
Well, we went to the movies. We went to dances. They had dances there, you know, in Hatfield. They had dance, the Granges mostly. And then in Sunderland there was dances upstairs up in the town hall. And mostly it was square dancing.
Did you consider yourself a good dancer?
No, I learned. When anyone asked me to dance, I went, and I probably stumbled over their toes and everything, but I did pretty good because I was asked a lot of times, so.
So, when did he propose?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't think he proposed. He just how about getting married? And I said, yeah, and that was it.
What did your parents say about it?
Well, they didn't like it very well, I don't think, but,
Why?
well, I don't know. They didn't tell me. They never fussed. You know, anytime when they asked me, do you like him? Do you want him? I said, yeah. I didn't know any better.
So what was your wedding day like?
Oh, the wedding day? Oh dear. I don't remember. It was terrible.
You don't remember because it was terrible, or you don't remember, period? Where did you get married?
We got married in the church.
St. Stanislaus?
Yeah.
Big wedding?
Well, it was over at his house, Podworski's house, because we lived in Conway then, so
Okay, so you got married. Where did you live after that?
we lived with the Podworskis for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then we lived on the garage road in Kidder's house, one of the Kidder's house.
Now,
And-
did you buy that, or what? Did you
No,
rent
it was for rent.
Mm-hmm.
And then we bought the, I don't know, that little house. Carly, what's the name of that house where we bought?
She can. You can answer. Don't worry. On Garage Road. What was the name of the house?
That house that we lived. I showed you. Remember that little?
We'll have to point it out later
Name
on.
of the house?
Well, the address.
By Podworski's.
That was their house.
That was their house, yes.
And the house is still standing.
Next to it, Adamski?
No.
Kozlowski? No.
It was next to Kozlowski's, is down on the side of the hill.
But the house is still standing, right?
Yeah, the house is still standing there.
Okay. How long was it? No, when you got married, what did you do for work?
What did I do for work? Well, Joe worked for Clarence Clark, and he was, helping with the farmland there. And of course, he had land to rent. And Joe rented 2 acres of onions from him, and I working in the onion field.
Make much money with onions?
No, after we sold the onions, we didn't have any money left.
So,
And of course when the farming was over, well, Joe didn't do any work anywhere or anything, and so I got a job and I worked for Clarence Clark as housework.
so let's see. When was your daughter born?
Oh, she was born in March.
And her name?
And
Her
And
name?
her name is Carolyn.
Does she have a middle name?
No, I don't think so. Have you got a middle name, Carly?
She can't remember. What year was she born in?
31.
31. Now, was she born in the hospital or at the
Yeah, she was born in the hospital in Northampton.
Northampton?
Yeah. Well, the doctor that I had and everything, he went on Easter vacation because it was at Easter time. And he went on an Easter vacation, and so I had to get Dr. Rice.
What was the, how much was the hospital bill for that?
Oh dear, I don't remember none of that.
How
I
long
stayed a whole week or
A whole
10 days in there.
Now, where did you had your daughter, and when did you become separated from your husband?
Oh, I got separated from my husband when she was about 10 or 12 years old.
Oh, that old?
Yes.
That old.
We were married for 13 years.
What made you get a divorce?
What?
What made you get the divorce?
Well, because he was, he drinking a lot.
Now, was a divorce wasn't a common thing back in those years, were they?
No, it wasn't. Oh my, I was the dirt of the town.
You were.
Yes, I certainly was. I was terrible.
What made you get the divorce if no one else went through it?
Are you going to print that in the paper?
No.
Well, why I got a divorce is because, he used to drink all the time. And I worked for Clark's, and he'd take the money and he would drink it. Then when he bought a second-hand car, and he started driving it. And he had it registered. He couldn't get a license because he lost his everything and he had a bad name. So he went to Mike Skibitsky, and Mike Skibitsky came to me and said that Joe wants to get a license and buy the car and put it on my name. And he says, I don't agree with that. And he got mad at me. So he says, he's going to make you do it. And I says, well, he's not going to make me do it because I'm not going to do it. Mm. And I didn't do it. So some way or other, he finagled, and then he smashed up. And then when he smashed up, a couple cops come to the house, and I says, what's the matter? It was in the middle of the night, as usual, and the cops come in the house, I let him in, and he says, he's hurt. And I says, badly? And he says, no, he got a couple of bruises and everything, he bleeding, but he's all right. I says, where is he? He's in jail. I says, well, good, let him stay there. Mm. I says, I don't want him here. I says, so the next day he come home. And that was it. And then after a while, guess what happened? He got a gun somewhere, and he starts shooting around the place. And I says, oh, that's already bad. And his mother tried to get the gun, and she wouldn't let him have the gun, and then he had a fight with her and everything. And I says, well, that's going too far.
Hmm. So it's time to leave.
Yeah, it was time for me to leave, and I left, yeah. Believe me.
During the time that you lived in Sunderland, there was a hurricane and flood.
Yeah, oh yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was raining, and we were coming home from work, and we couldn't get already the bridges and everything were down. Well, by that time, I wasn't working for Clark's. I worked for the men's school at the private school doing laundry day in, day out for 6 days. And Jean Corielli was the cook there, so she worked in the kitchen. I worked in the laundry, and her husband, that little place there that where they're renting they're renting that little place. That used to be a meat market.
Where, in Deerfield?
In Sunderland.
Okay.
Bus stop. Across the street from Johnny Benjamin's.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that little place.
Yeah.
But of course, at that time, it was a white house. It wasn't a yellow one. Mm-hmm. And he had a meat market there, and he would travel back and forth. He had a little truck that opened up, and he had scale, and he had ice, and he used to come up the hill, and I would buy meat from him, hot dogs mostly, and hamburger, because that's all we could afford. Because at that time you could get 3 pounds of hamburger for a quarter. Yeah. And hot dogs were 10 cents a pound or something. So when I had hot dogs, and of course I'd boil potato and vegetable, and that would make the meal and everything. And I worked for $8 a week at the Bement private school there. And I traveled back and forth with Jean Corielli. She had the car and she drove, so that's how we did.
So the bridge was down. This was during the flood.
So we got there, and the bridge was down.
Well, the flood was up.
And the flood was way over.
Yeah. What year was that? 1936 or 38?
Yeah, I guess it was 1938, I think. Mm-hmm. Because Carly was already big, and she was going to school. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't get there. So we went back to South Deerfield, Jean and I, and her husband, and we went. There was no place to stay, no place, and we're wet. And Jean went to Redmond a hotel at that time, and we went up on the third floor. There was no bed, no nothing, but at least we were out of the rain and everything. And there was a little window, and we kept looking at the window, because when we looked out that window, we could see the water in Sunderland
Really?
was all covered up. The houses and everything.
Where was your daughter?
Well, she was over to Podworski's, and you know, the water didn't get up that high.
So you weren't worried about her?
Well, I was worried about her, but what could I do?
You had no phone?
No phone. The phones were down. Everything was down.
How long did it take you to get back into town? Did you go on another bridge?
Oh no, they had a boat and a canoe, and we traveled back and forth on the canoe and everything. And Jean had the car parked on the South Deerfield side, and from the bridge to here we walked.
Did
That was for about a year before they built the bridge. When they were building the bridge already and everything, we walked. You know, we had like a catwalk or something, and we walked back and forth.
weren't
But
you scared?
everybody parked their cars across the road, across the bridge.
Weren't you scared going on the ferry between on the river?
Well, it wasn't a ferry; it was a little boat.
Yeah.
There was, he only took about 4 people at a time.
What was the hurricane like?
Oh, it was terrible. The wind was blowing and everything.
What was the day like for what do you remember besides the wind blowing and it was terrible and everything?
Well, the water and everything, and you could see animals floating and everything. And one time we were going by, and there was a dead cow floating out, and
Now this was during the flood, right?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, hurricane.
Okay.
That was during the hurricane, the flood. There's cats and dogs and chickens and.
Now, most of your shopping was done over at the at John McGrath's.
John McGrath's, yeah.
What was the name of his store at the time?
Oh, John McGrath. We always said John McGrath, but I don't know.
Okay. All right.
I don't know the name of the store. There was a post office right next to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. While you were living in Sunderland, what was happening to the farm up in Conway?
Oh, well, most of my sisters were already getting older, and little by little they all left. And the only one that was left there was Christine. She was the youngest and everything. So they stayed there. And then when the South Deerfield Water Department got a notion that the cows in the pasture were polluting their water.
How many cows did you have at the time?
Well, we had 21 or 22 in that category, and they polluted. And not only them, but Harvey Moore's cows were on the pasture, and the Roaring Brooks kept going through the place. We had 3 Roaring Brooks, 3 pastures, 3 Roaring Brooks, and they were all going into one thing. And Harvey Moore had cows, Rutkowski had cows, Alice had cows, and Auntie's had cows, but already Auntie's was altogether different, you know what I mean? They didn't bother Auntie's because they still have the cows there. Cyphers, well, he's gone now, but they don't have no cows, but the Seifert was included. So they put up a stink, and they wanted us to sell the cows. Well, we couldn't sell the cows and make a living and everything, so then Dad was fighting it, and what's his name now? The Waterworks Company. Well, I don't know, I don't think he's got it anymore. Well, finally we gave in, we sold the farm, and we went back to live in Greenfield. And
Oh.
while they went back to live in Greenfield, well, that's at the time that I got a divorce,
Mhm.
and I worked at the pickle shop in South Deerfield, and I told Carly that morning, because that morning he got up, he was like a crazy man. I fixed him some breakfast before I was gonna go to work, and he opened the door and he threw the dish out and he pushed me out, and I went down the hill, and there was, and I took the hole, imagine the hole and I walked in the house, and I thought to myself, if he's gonna touch me again, I'm gonna hit him over the head. I don't care what's gonna happen, I'm gonna kill him.
Mhm.
And so finally, he just, you know what he did? He picked up his lunchbox and he went down the stairs to his mother's, and because that time he lost his license and everything, so he had a bicycle.
Yeah.
So he went off to work, and I come in and I woke Carly up, and I says, Carly, I says, you go to school, you come home from school, you take the bus to South Deerfield. They had buses running from here to South Deerfield at that time. And I said, you stop at the pickle shop and you stay with me. And then she and I went on a bus from the pickle shop to Greenfield to my mother's place.
Okay, where was that located up in Greenfield?
Well, that was located on Chapman Street.
Mhm. And the house is still standing?
Yeah, the house is still standing there.
So you moved back to Greenfield,
Yes.
and your daughter
Yeah,
started to
and
go back to
Dad
school.
and Mom moved back to Greenfield, but instead of Wells Street, they moved on Chapman Street. They bought a house there.
How many kids were living with them at the time?
Well, Chris was living there. And Franny and Sebby, and Franny and Sebby still, but they went to work, but they used to come on weekends.
And you lived in the same house?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Did you get any, did you ever go back to Sunderland to pick up your belongings or anything?
Oh yes, we got a truck. Stella helped me, and we start moving, and your grandmother tried to push us out, and the man said, this is my truck. She's to start taking the furniture off the truck, you know. And I only took one bedroom because I was told to leave the stove and a place for him to sleep. So that's all I did. I took the ironing board. I think I took a washing machine, and my clothes and things, and that's it.
So back up in Greenfield, there were what, three of your sisters living there.
Yeah.
Where did everyone else go?
Well, there were Stella got married, and she lived in New York, Scarsdale, New York, or White Plains, New York. Marion got married, and she lived in New York Heights. And Jane got married, and she lived in Connecticut. Franny's living in Connecticut too, Windsor Locks. And Ann's living in Connecticut.
How come they all moved to Connecticut and New York, and from
I guess
from Greenfield they moved to Connecticut, New York, and how they meet the men? How they meet their husbands?
Well, I guess they probably went to dances and places like that, and in the city they had more.
When they moved away, did they come back home a lot, or?
Yeah, they kept coming home. Oh yes, every time at Christmas time, Easter time, and everything. We had birthdays. We started selling birthdays, making cakes, buying presents. Christmas time, we begin to live like ordinary people then.
So once the farm was sold up in Conway, what happened to what happened to the house and barn up there?
At the Conway?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's another thing. The waterwork company, those men. Oh, I got it on the tip of my tongue. And, so,
That's gonna probably come later on.
well, maybe it'll come to me. They start making parties. And of course, you know, we had telephones, but we didn't have no electricity. We didn't have no electricity. And they had parties there, and of course the house was, you know, it was in good shape. We fixed it up, we put a new roof on it and everything and all that. And they started having parties. And they'd stay there for 2 or 3 nights, you know, and everything. Everything was all right. The last time they had a party there, they got snowed in. No telephone, couldn't get out, you know, and when you get snowed in there, you know, those hills and that snow, you just can't get out.
Mm-hmm.
And because lots of times when Dad and Mom used to, you know what, we used to go to Conway, they used to hitch up the horses to the sleigh, and from Seiferd's farm, that hill, they towed us in.
Mm.
And so that's what happened. They got slowed in and they couldn't get out, and people didn't know, the other gang didn't know what happened to them, so they went looking for them. Finally they called up the town of Conway and they plowed them out and everything. So out of a clear sky, everything happened, the house burned down. No electricity, no nothing, but the house burned down. So the house is burned down.
No, the last time you were up there, they had all pine trees planted up
Yeah,
there.
all pine trees planted now and everything. And you know, now they're complaining that their water is poor. Why shouldn't it be poor? You know, the cows used to clean the shrubbery and bushes. Now everything is all flooded and you can't go anywhere because the springs have got their own ways of going. And the water's polluted again and nobody there to clean up the trash.
When your sisters got married, how were the weddings?
Good.
Good weddings.
Yeah.
You were a good dancer at that time?
Uh-huh. Let's see, Franny got married in South Deerfield. Marion got married in South Deerfield because the Kajatka family, they come to the house and we had something to eat. You know, it was a small affair. It wasn't a whole lot or anything.
So, who paid for the wedding? Your father?
I guess so, yeah. That far I don't know.
Okay. We're just going to take a short break now. Okay. Now we're moving along. When did you meet your second husband, and what was his name?
Oh, his name was Edward Wysocki.
And how did you meet him?
I met him through his cousin. She worked at the Miller's Falls Stool, and I worked at the Miller's Falls Stool, and that's how we met. Mm-hmm. And he was in World War II, mm-hmm. and he come from the service at that time. And when I went up, because we went to movies a lot, we went out to eat a lot and stuff like that, you know. And of course, when I met him and everything, then of course, for some reason or other, he asked me to go out with him, and we went to the shows and everything, and we went out.
How old was your daughter at that time?
Oh.
How old was Carly?
Oh, she was 18, I guess, or something like that. Yeah, where did you, she worked at the Greenfield Tap and Dye on Sanderson Street.
How old was she when you got married?
When she got married?
Yeah.
I guess she was, I don't know, 21, I think.
But she was already married by the time you married for the second time, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, when did you decide to get married for the second time?
Well, let's see. He went to oh, he asked me to marry him before he went to Florida. But he didn't have no place there to stay. And I told him that I wouldn't marry him until he built a house so that I could live in, so that we could live in the house.
Did he go to Florida a lot, or was this the first time he went to Florida?
No, I went with him only once. Well, I didn't go before I was married. I got married.
But did he go down to Florida every year, or did
Well,
he do farm work?
he was going every year before he went into the service. When he was called to go to the service, well, he was in the service for about 3 years, I think, so he didn't go. But afterwards, he went. After he come out of the service.
So he went down, built a house for you.
Yeah.
Did you know anything about Florida at all before you
No,
went down?
no, I didn't know anything. That's another thing I didn't know. Didn't know nothing. I just went to Florida.
Did you know even where Florida was?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't know where even Florida was.
How'd you get there?
With car. We drove down.
How long did it take?
About, couple of days.
What amazed you on the way down there? Well, this is probably your first time out of New England, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. And I was, especially when we come to the Carolinas and I saw the palm trees and the warm weather, and seeing that we left in the winter time. It was cold here, and I thought it was wonderful because it was so nice and warm. We went through the Carolinas, Virginias, and all that. It was getting warm. The trees were in bloom, the flowers and everything. And I said, "Oh, what a beautiful country!" You know.
Mhm.
I never went anywhere else.
How did you keep in contact with your daughter? Well, she was already married.
Yeah, she was living in Sunderland.
So,
Telephone.
yeah.
Called her. She called me. I called her.
So, describe Florida and Homestead in particular when you arrived.
Well, when we got there, I was disappointed because there wasn't hardly any stores. It was all farms, you know. There was a bank. There was a library. And there was a few scattered stores, you know. They were they weren't big stores or anything. They were like a shed, you know, and it was like an open market, in other words, you know. They didn't have windows, they had shutters. For the night, they'd close the shutters. And for the daytime, they'd open the shutters and bring everything out, and that's the way it was. And you know, it was Homestead, and it was 90 miles to Key West. So you see, and it was all farmers and a lot of colored people. And you had to be careful how you talked and everything. Of course, I was scared of them anyway, so I didn't say.
Why were you scared of them?
Well, I don't know. They didn't look they weren't dressed right. They were ragged. To be honest with you, they looked like bums.
Did you have many colored people in Greenfield?
No, they don't have very many colored people in Greenfield.
So-
At that time,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't.
So what did you do down there?
Farm.
What did you grow?
Okra, beans, tomatoes, cabbage, cauliflower.
You make a lot of money?
No. He had a truck. He used to take it all the way into Miami to sell it. Summer squash we had, and zucchinis, and you know, we'd pack them in those little baskets and everything, and you take them up, and one time I went with them, and those guys look around and say, "Well, this is no good, this is no good," you know, and everything, and they'd throw them around and everything, and it used to make me so mad because there was, you know, with me living on a farm and everything, I knew what was number one, what wasn't. Let me just put it that way.
Did you have a tractor?
Yeah, he had a tractor, yeah. He plowed and stuff like that.
How many acres did you grow?
We had 40 acres,
Really?
yeah.
Anyone, did you hire anyone to help
Well,
harvest?
when it come to picking okra and everything, you know, we'd hire, let's see, 5 or 6 colored, and most naturally colored ones.
Mhm. So, what was your house like in Homestead? The one that you waited for to get married?
Oh, well, it was a nice house.
Mhm.
I enjoyed it. It was a comfortable house. It was made out of blocks as usual, and windows, it had jalousie windows. It was all on one floor. It was 2 bedrooms, and a living room and a kitchen, and then we had a utility room, what they call a utility room. Well, it was built onto the house, and we had a carport.
Now, your parents moved down to Florida. Right?
Yeah, well, I wanted them to, in a sense of way, I kept telling them that if I liked it, I would let them know. And Dad wanted to go there because, you know, he really was failing. And I says, I'll let you know. And then in time, how do you like it, Helen? Oh, I like it. It's nice and warm. It's good. It's wonderful. So that next year, the following year, we come home and they sold their house and they moved to Florida. And they rented that house, and then that house was for sale, so Dad bought that.
What was the address?
Huh?
What was the address in Homestead?
Oh, it was Northeast 3rd Street. I remember it was a 3rd Street, Northeast 3rd Street. And it was closer, and of course at that time already, they were building, Byron's was built there, and Quick Check was built there, you know, they built all those things, you know, so it was all.
So who else moved down? Let's see, well, you had other sisters that moved down too, didn't you?
Oh, Evelyn's moved down. She's living in Miami. She's still there. She likes it there. She's still there.
And so Evelyn was down there, you were down there,
Uh-huh.
your parents were down there. Any of the other sisters moved down there?
Well, no. Evelyn moved down there, of course. Then when her son come from the service, he was in the Air Force. When he was in the service, they stayed there, and of course he met a girl in Wisconsin and everything, and he got married, and of course Evelyn's family is there.
Mm-hmm.
Her son passed away and her husband passed away, but Pat is living there yet, and let's see, her son's name's Paul and Mike and Marie.
And they all lived in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, they all lived in the same neighborhood.
So, did you have any hurricanes while you were down there?
Oh yes, but we had a bad one, and of course I had shutters. I had a little front porch with all windows in it, so I had the shutters there, and I turned around and I put the shutters up, screwed them in, put them on, and everything, and just stayed in. If the electric light went out, the electricity went out, the telephone went out and everything, but I always planned when they would let us know when the hurricane was coming, so I didn't buy too much stuff to put in a refrigerator because I knew it would be out. So that, but afterwards I would walk down. I had the car, so I drive down to the store and pick up a few things for myself.
What happened to your second husband, Butch?
Oh, he was, what was his name that there? Decker. Yeah, Decker. And he worked for,
What did he do down there?
He worked on the for the farm, and he was a big farmer. Now he was a big farmer that he had when the fertilizers, you know, over there when they call or order fertilizer, they come by train by carloads, and he worked. Well, anyway, whatever his name was, I don't know. But anyway, he was loading it on the truck, and he had a bag of fertilizer, and he twisted the long way, and he crushed one of the vertebrae, and from then on, he wasn't able to work.
And so what did you do for work down there?
Well, I worked at the Avocado Elementary School in Homestead as a cook. I worked there for 13 years.
And what was the cause of death when Butch passed away? What did he finally die of?
Well, he went to Coral Gables Veterans Hospital because he was a veteran, so they took care of him over there. They couldn't do anything for him there, so then he turned around and he said, ladies clinic here in Boston. So I took him and drove for 2 days and a night, and I'm telling you, it was, when I went to bed, I could see the lights flashing in my face. And when we got to Greenfield, he had a sister by the name of Helen McDonald. So I stayed with her, and he took the bus, and he went to the lady clinic. And they took more tests, and they did this and that for him. They couldn't do nothing for him. And he had surgery after a while, and the more surgery he had on his spine, those things that grow on, what's his name?
Spurs?
The what?
Spurs?
Yeah, spurs, and you know when you have a bad cut.
Scars?
Yeah, scars.
Scars.
And when you have a scar, and when they grow on, well, so he had 3 operations, and every time he had a scar, he had to have a different way and everything, and the scars all overgrown. And
how long were you staying up in Greenfield? Or how long were you back in New England?
Oh, well, I stayed about 10 days with her, because then they let him out as soon as he was able to. So we come back to Florida, and then he went back to the hospital there, and that was it. He'd stay there for a while, and then they'd keep giving him dope pills, and that was the end of that.
Yeah. When did he finally pass away?
He finally passed away in I don't know.
Was it late 60s?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. We're wrapping up here. We're getting towards the end here. So, and then what? One of the big jobs that you had was working at Monkey Jungle.
Oh, well,
yeah.
when he was sick and everything, you know, and the government, he got his pension and everything, so we were able to live on that. But afterwards, when they couldn't do anything for him, that was it. So I got a job working in Monkey Jungle, because when I worked at the school, I worked till the school closed. After the school closed, I wasn't able to work, so I didn't have any money to live on. So then I got, there was a Helen Burnett that I knew, and she worked at the Monkey Jungle. And we were quite close, you know, we got in touch with each other and everything. And she says, well, you can get a job there. And I says, what'll I do there? And she says, work it and register and everything. And I says, gee, I never run a register or anything. So she made an appointment for me. So I took the car and went up to the Monkey Jungle. And I had a nice talk with Mrs. Dumont and Mr. And I was honest with him. I says, well, I've worked so long as a cook and everything, and I says, I've never worked in the register sell tickets or anything. He says, well, there's nothing to sell tickets. And uh, he says, you know, when you sell 2 tickets, how much it costs? Just punch it and then that's it and get the change. And I says, well, I guess I could do that. So that's how I got a job there. And then I worked every day, winter and summer.
Now, now you did take and move back, of course, up north, whatever. Let's see here. Now, how old were you when you were working at Monkey Jungle?
How old I was?
Yeah.
Oh, I was close to 40 years old.
Really?
Yes.
When you worked at Monkey Jungle?
Yes.
40.
40.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
How many years did you work there?
Well, I think I worked, let's see, I was married to Bush for 13 years, again 13 years. And I was working at the Monkey Jungle after that, after he,
I figure if he passed away in the late 60s,
yeah,
13 years onto that would put you up into the 80s.
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What did you do after you worked at the Monkey Jungle?
Well,
Wasn't there a farm or avocado place that you worked at?
yes, I worked in the packing houses, packed avocados and mangoes and everything during the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you stayed busy. Let's see, when did you move back up to New England?
New England?
Yeah. When did you move back to Sunderland?
Oh, over here,
Mhm.
uh, about 14 years ago,
Mhm.
84,
So what have you been doing since then?
since then. I retired, I didn't do anything.
You do nothing.
Yeah. Well, I worked still till, because when I started to collect, when I went to investigate about my Social Security, I didn't have enough quarters. So I was 65, but he told me, he says, are you well? And I says, yeah. He was very good, that man was. And he says to me, he says, have you got a job? And I says, yes. How do you feel? And I says, good. He says, well, why don't you work some more? He says, and then when your quarters will be up, at least you'll be getting something, because I was only getting $500, see? And now I get 600. And it's because, you know, I've been getting little raises now. Up till then, I wouldn't be. And if I work at that time, if I quit and worked for $480 or something, I wouldn't ever. If they gave me a raise, I wouldn't be able to get it, because that's the way it was.
Okay, what do you consider to be your biggest or best achievement in your life?
My biggest achievement?
Yeah.
Well, I've had the experience of working hard all the time wherever I went. I had to struggle.
Okay. You've got 3 grandchildren.
Yes.
No, 2 grandchildren.
I have 3
Great-grandchildren.
grandchildren.
Okay. And you got 2 grandchildren.
Yes.
And your 1 daughter.
Yes.
Considering that this is going to hopefully last a while, what would you like to say to future generations? Maybe
The future generation?
Yeah, as in like your great-great-grandchildren or whatever.
Well, what I went through, I wouldn't want any of them to go through what I went through. But on the other hand, I've had a lot of experience, a lot of tough time, that I managed to work and get myself, you know, to work and not get into any trouble. This young generation, they've got everything what they want, and all they do is shooting and killing, drinking, smoking pot. So what kind of a future are they going to have?
Don't know.
That's it.
Don't know.
And you know, it's a shame because it's such a wonderful place to live in.
Hmm.
It is. It's a wonderful place to live in.
So encapsulate it, you just say shape up?
Yes, in other words, they better shape up because they're going to, if they don't shape up, they're going to be awfully hard on them. And another thing, they will not know how to cope with it.
Yeah.
Because at least when we had it hard up, we coped with it, we worked, we did anything. Even when we had a garden, when we were hungry, when we were haying or anything and we were hungry, we'd go out to the garden, pick up a carrot, pull it out, and wipe it on our dungarees. At that time, we called them overalls, and we would eat it. And we didn't care whether there was sand there or not. We were hungry and we ate it. Or the tomatoes too. Oh, and apples. We couldn't wait to get the apples ripe on the trees. We used to climb up there.
At this, we're talking on February the 23rd, 1997. How many sisters do you still have living?
How many what?
Sisters do you still have living?
Well, my sister, let's see, there's 4 that are dead. My oldest, I'm the oldest, Evelyn is next, and Jane. The 3 of us are living. Stella is already gone. Steph is already gone. And Marion, Marion and Sebby were born on the farm. They're already gone. Estelle was born in Greenfield, and Steph was born in Greenfield, and they're gone. So you see, the ones that were born in New Hampshire were still living. We're still hanging in.
Still hanging in there.
Yeah.
Well, I think this will probably wrap it up. I thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Say good night.
Good night.